Welcome, everybody. We'll give folks just a minute or so to join, and we'll go ahead and get started. All righty. Well, we'll go ahead and jump in. Hello and welcome, everybody. Um, Welcome to our 2023 Better Buildings Summer Webinar Series. We're dedicated to bringing you the latest and actionable insights from leading industry experts, and this annual series is a wonderful opportunity to explore the topics, technologies, and trends that affect your organization, as well as efforts to ultimately accelerate decarbonization and energy efficiency adoption. If we go to the next slide, today's webinar is called Here Comes the Sun, Innovative Community Solar Systems. And hopefully that song will be stuck in your head all day. And before we go ahead and dive in now, just a couple housekeeping points I'd like to cover. Today's webinar will be recorded and archived on the Better Building Solutions Center, and we'll follow up when today's recording and slides are made available. Next, just a note that attendees are in listen-only mode, which means that your microphones have been muted. But if you do experience any audio or visual issues throughout the webinar, please go ahead and send a message in the Q&A box located at the bottom of your Zoom panel. If you go to the next slide. My name is Bree Colin, and I have the pleasure of being your moderator and host for today's webinar. I currently serve as a fellow in the Building Technologies Office at the Department of Energy, and thrilled to be here with you today. We go to the next slide. Our overarching agenda for today's webinar, we're going to start off introducing folks to our interactive platform Slido by engaging in some polls here to start off, and then we're joined by some wonderful presenters today on the topic of community solar, who will share a lot of valuable information coming from their organizations and how they engage with community solar. And then finally, we'll wrap up with a Q&A portion and conclude our webinar. So if you go to the next slide, we'll start off first here by accessing slido.com. Just a few notes about slido.com. If folks could access it through either their mobile device or by opening a new window in your internet browser, today's event code is hashtag or pound DOE. And if you would like to ask our panelists questions throughout today's webinar, please go ahead and submit them at any point throughout their presentations, and we'll answer those questions and save them towards the end of the webinar. You will also be able to add a thumbs up icon to certain questions that you'd like to upvote, which will result in the most popular questions moving to the top of the queue to be addressed. And next, we'll go ahead and dive into those polls by utilizing Slido. So if first off, we want to learn more about you. So let's go ahead, if you'd like to join us over at Slido and respond to our initial questions. If again, you have any issues, please go ahead and send a message to our tech support team by utilizing that Zoom Q&A function. So the first question, just easy here to start off, if you'd like to enter in what sector you're joining us from, help us get a lay of the land in terms of who's in our virtual room here to start. And I see right off the bat, we have a lot of representatives coming from contractors and consultants, others who might not be able to fit in one of these buckets here. Appreciate everybody taking a moment or so to enter this information. A lot of folks joining us from local government, wonderful nonprofits, and great representatives too from the industrial sector, state government, higher ed. Wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining us and entering that information. It's helpful for us and our speakers to know where folks are joining us from in terms of different sectors. Great. If we go to the next question. First off, we want to have a understanding here at the beginning of what folks' level of familiarity and engagement with community solar is. So have a couple options, and folks are welcome to also select multiple options too with this question, whether they're more, I'm seeing a good proportion start off with novice, this is new to them, and people wanting to learn how to engage with community solar. They might be discussing community solar options, whether internally or externally. Maybe you've connected with some vendors and other organizations, or your peers within and across sectors to try and understand how others have utilized community solar. I'm seeing a percentage too, maybe not familiar at this point. So we're thrilled to have you here and share some information coming from our wonderful speakers. Some are already currently subscribing to community solar, enjoying some of those benefits too that come with that. And to see a good percentage too, 7% approximately, that are currently hosting a community solar site. So maybe have some of that real estate and some of that space to host a site on their campus or land there. And if we scroll down a little bit, I see a little percentage too that might be sponsoring community solar projects. So that's wonderful to get to see that support too. Perfect. And I'm seeing overwhelming majority definitely might be new to them. So we're thrilled to have you here and share some information around how to engage in opportunities there. Great. Things are leveling off here in our horse race, it seems like. If we go to the next question. For those maybe that have had experience engaging and implementing community solar, we're curious to learn more about the successes or benefits that you've experienced by engaging with community solar. And I know a lot of folks might be new to them. Maybe something that you've heard, I'm curious, something you'd be looking forward to in order to access certain benefits too. So feel free to take a moment to enter and type in those answers. I'm seeing cost savings as a big one, and probably helpful for those, that haven't embarked yet on it, to understand too, what are some of those successes and benefits that other organizations have experienced and are enjoying too at this point. Seeing visibility of the project. Yeah, I think that's huge, especially with ESG initiatives and sustainability practices, getting to walk the walk there. Cost savings being huge. Happier customers, that goes a really long way. And the opportunities can't be understated to educate others, especially elected officials too there. Wonderful. I'm seeing a great climate resiliency, good variation too here. And wonderful opportunities too for folks, companies, reduced emissions, definitely a big goal in implementing. Seems like a variety of projects have been successful, and heard from others that there's been a lot of benefits to those rebates. Cost savings for residents. It can be more approachable too from some other pathways, such as power purchase agreements, virtual power purchase agreements, and definitely reducing that energy burden in low income disadvantaged communities. I think those, especially those under-resourced areas, being able to provide those benefits is huge. Well, thank you everybody for taking some time there. Resilience is definitely a huge benefit and success, and thinking about a lot of these systems holistically, and ultimately being able to reduce our collective emissions as a local example of clean energy. Wonderful. Building wealth and opportunities. Feel free to keep entering that information in, and we'll transition to the next question. Now wanting to understand what challenges have been experienced with those that are engaging with or implementing community solar. Maybe you're in some planning stages or even having some of those exploratory conversations. You're curious to learn a little bit more about any challenges that have been experienced related to community solar. Bureaucracy. I know, some of the last responses to the question were education for folks. So sometimes there's red tape that may come into play there. Public opinion, funding and land, zoning considerations, utilities, the ability to keep the renewable energy certificates, delays from utilities, funding, definitely a huge theme there. Lack of engagement. I think sometimes that can go paired with those education considerations as well. Some different policies from state to state and the legalities on community solar. Appreciate that. Some of those nuances with grid interconnections and agreements there, considerations to make. And along with those state policies, some of those differences from state to state and those impacts there. Integration with the grid and 3 stars. I love that. Infrastructure considerations. Yeah, I think, sometimes the capital that's involved there is definitely significant. Those connectivity, transmission elements, finding that site and that real estate, which is large enough to accommodate those loads. Resistance to change, and I think that's a huge part too, and some of those additional comments there about lack of understanding and what is community solar. There's a lot of different terminologies that one of our speakers, Anna, is going to go through that community solar can be referred to. So sometimes that helps just to clear up some confusions too around different terminologies. Well, wonderful. Well, thank you all again. Please feel free to take additional time to enter in that information. That's very helpful, not only for us, but also for our speakers to understand what our virtual audience is experiencing and some of that introductory information to benefit their presentations. We go to the next slide. I mentioned we are joined by some wonderful presenters today. We have Anna Bowser, Marcel Rogers, and Thomas Grant. We'll start off here with Anna Bowser. Just a little bit about Anna to start. Anna joined the Solar Energy Technologies Office in June 2021 as the Solar Community Engagement Coordinator for the National Community Solar Partnership. In this role, she provides technical support for stakeholder engagement and communications to grow the reach and impact of the program. Anna is an AmeriCorps alum with roots in community engagement, education, and youth leadership development. Prior to joining DOE, she served in and managed the Youth Energy Squad, an AmeriCorps program in Detroit, Michigan, that engages young people in place-based education and leadership on energy burden reduction in their communities. Anna holds a master's in public affairs from the University of Michigan and a bachelor's in environmental studies from the University of Colorado Boulder. Thank you for being here with us today, Anna. I will turn it over to you to start.
Thank you so much, Bree. It is really exciting to be here. Again, my name is Anna Balzer. I am a contractor supporting the U.S. Department of Energy's National Community Solar Partnership. We can go ahead to the next slide. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here today to cover a little bit of background on what community solar is and why community solar is. But I'm also really excited to hear about two really great programs and projects from Marcel and Thomas later on. So without any further ado, we can jump right in, go to the next slide. So before I start to talk about what community solar is, I'd really like to discuss that why. Why do we care about community solar? Why is it a model of solar deployment? So a couple of years ago, the National Renewable Energy Lab did a study on the ability of households and businesses to install a solar system on their own roof so that they were able to access the benefits that come along with generating your own energy through solar. And what they found was that about half of all households and businesses can't host a solar system on their roof. And what they were looking at to determine that was just whether or not the roof was suitable. So was there enough sunlight hitting it? Was it big enough to host a solar system and structurally sound? And whether or not they owned it. So they actually weren't even taking into account the ability to have the financials to fund the upfront costs of that system. So what we know right now is that half of households and businesses right from the jump are not able to put solar on their own roof and therefore are not able to access the benefits of solar energy through rooftop solar. So community solar allows households and businesses to participate in solar and receive the benefits from solar without hosting it on their own roof, which is why community solar is such an important part of the Biden-Harris administration's agenda for clean energy adoption, but has really become a strong model for solar adoption. So in the pie charts we see here, you can kind of see how community solar is doing so far. So solar is about 10% of electric generation in the United States right now. Right now, community solar is just 5% of that total solar generation. And I just wanted to call it out here that the type of community solar that is specifically serving low and moderate income households or low income households is still a very small portion of that, but is rapidly growing. So if we can go to the next slide. As I said, this is a system that is growing, the community solar network across the United States. We just released data, or the National Renewable Energy Lab just released data last week with the final numbers from the end of 2022, and we have about 6 gigawatts across 2,500 projects across the United States of community solar right now, and that number has doubled almost every year since 2010. We're seeing a lot of growth in community solar. As you can see from this map, though, it's concentrated in a couple of areas. So we're not necessarily seeing community solar spread out evenly across all of the states. And we can go to the next slide. One of the primary reasons for that is that state policies have a really big impact on the ease at which community solar can be developed. So as you can see on this in this table here, those are the top 10 states where community solar capacity is located, and most of them do have enabling legislation, with a very notable exception from Florida, which does not have legislation that supports community solar, but has seen a really large investment by their investor-owned utility in community solar programming in that state. So when we're talking about community solar policies, it's often referred to broadly as enabling legislation, but that actually breaks down in a couple of different policy types. So one of those policy types is called a mandate, which means that the state is requiring that their regulated utilities have certain levels of community solar deployment or provide a certain level of community solar to their customers. Another policy type is an incentive. So that means that the state or another body is providing additional financial incentives to either utilities or project developers to help make community solar projects financially feasible, and often make sure that the benefits from that project are passed along to the subscribers of those projects. And then this last category is broadly enabled. So this is just some form of policy that allows or provides other resources to support utilities in the development of community solar. But as you saw on the slide before, there's at least one community solar project in 40 states plus DC, which is much more than this 22 states that have that enabling legislation or supportive policy. And that's because community solar as a model is inherently flexible and often very innovative. So we can go to the next slide and I'll start to talk a little bit about what community solar is. So community solar, like Bree mentioned early on, can be called a lot of different things. So you may hear different names used for community solar, but they're all tying back to this model of being able to share benefits of community solar. So we can go to the next slide. So community solar is really a business model, and it's a business model that allows all households and businesses, again, regardless of their ability to install solar on their own roof, to benefit from the benefits of a community solar project or a solar project in their community. And that benefit piece, the ability to share benefits, is really the key to the Department of Energy's definition of community solar, which is intentionally very broad. We consider community solar to be any solar project in which those benefits are distributed across multiple customers. So one solar array is able to serve and provide benefits to multiple customers. And those customers can be from a variety of areas. So it can be households, whether they rent or own their own homes, businesses, community centers, any consumer of electricity can benefit from a community solar project. And the benefits themselves too can also be wide-ranging. Most often, they fall under the idea of receiving a bill credit. So being able to see a reduction in your energy costs on your bill. But community solar can provide a variety of other benefits as well. So we can go to the next slide. The Department of Energy a couple of years ago did a lot of stakeholder engagement to really understand what the potential was for the benefits of community solar, and thinking about it in relation to the benefits that we see from rooftop solar. We've also aligned these with the priorities of the Biden-Harris administration through their Justice 40 initiative, which is ensuring that the benefits of certain clean energy investments are distributed equitably, ensuring that 40% of them go to disadvantaged communities. So what we came up with was a primary benefit being greater household savings. This is often the one that folks think of first. In our Slido earlier, saw that coming through as a really salient benefit. Seeing your energy costs reduce, that's a huge reason to participate in clean energy for folks. So making sure that community solar also provides significant savings with a target of 20% bill savings through community solar. We, of course, also want to see all households be able to participate and benefit from community solar. So real access for low and moderate income households is another priority. Resilience and other grid benefits, ensuring that community solar supports a more resilient grid and provides services in the event of power outages. We also have community ownership, so opportunities for community members to have ownership or otherwise benefit from wealth building opportunities through community solar. And then workforce development and entrepreneurship. So ensuring that community solar is helping to provide pathways to high quality jobs and support lots of different types of businesses and new entrepreneurs in this space. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, so talked a lot about the benefits. Let's get down to the nitty gritty of how this works. So there are lots of different models for community solar. This is really the most basic model. So in most community solar projects, there's a solar array that is constructed like any other solar array somewhere in a community or a utility territory. And then where it starts to differ from a traditional solar project is that it enrolls or subscribes customers known as subscribers, which again can include a variety of electricity customers in the community or somewhere in the utility territory. And they sign up to participate in the project. They're typically paying an upfront or monthly subscription fee, which can help finance the project. So they're participating in both the costs and the benefits of the project. In most cases, those subscribers can sign up for different sizes of a subscription. So they can size it to the amount of electricity that they use or a smaller amount, depending on how much they want to participate in the community solar program and how much capacity is left. So then next, that solar array, of course, produces energy that gets sent to the utility grid. And then that energy production is metered. So it's tracked and measured by the utility. And the utility pays the owner of the community solar project for the value of all that energy that's been produced. The community solar project owner then takes those earnings, the dollars they get from the utility, and divides them up amongst all of the subscribers of the projects. In a lot of cases, this can be done directly on their utility bill. So subscribers see the savings right on that same utility bill that they're getting every month. And so again, this allows a lot of different consumers to participate in solar without hosting it on their own roof. And we can go to the next slide. I want to talk a little bit about all the different ways that building owners or corporate entities can participate in community solar. There are a lot of different venues for coming into this. So the simplest form of participation is being a subscriber. So you can sign up for a community solar subscription somewhere in your community like any other subscriber. These often have short-term contracts. They're pretty low barrier to entry. And they can, in some cases, also come with renewable energy certificates, those RECs, for the portion of the project that they subscribe to. For businesses that want to make a more significant commitment to a project, they can participate as what's known as an anchor tenant. So an anchor tenant typically has a more significant portion of the energy produced, often up to 40% of the project's energy they'll take on, and they typically do so in a contract that's a little bit longer term. And this allows the project owner or manager of the project to manage some of that turnover that they might see in other customers that have shorter term contracts, and to make the project a little less risky for their financial investors. And often it actually reduces the costs that they have to develop the project, and they can pass those costs on to their customers, which is really important. So anchor tenants have a little bit more of an investment and commitment to the project, but it translates into more benefits for community members. For even deeper involvement, a building owner can also serve as a site host. So that means that they're actually hosting or installing the solar panels on their roof or on their property. They can use the energy that's produced by those solar panels directly on by the building that the solar panels are hosted on, or they can share them similar to other community solar projects back to the grid and participate more as a subscriber. And then finally, any corporate entity or building owner may also choose to serve as a project sponsor. So that means that they own or co-develop the solar project, and they're typically working in partnership with a community solar developer or other subscription management organization. We can go to the next slide. So this is mostly for your benefit after this webinar. This kind of spells out everything I just covered, but I did just want to acknowledge that these different ways to engage with community solar include different levels of investment and control over the outcomes of a project. And so for organizations that are just getting their feet wet in renewable energy, just being a subscriber to a community solar project can be a really low barrier way to engage and participate in a clean energy project. For those organizations that are a little further ahead, have bolder environmental or social governance goals, or want to really drive deeper project outcomes, hosting or sponsoring a community solar project or partnering closely with a developer to be an anchor tenant may be a better fit for you. And I think we're going to get some examples from both Marcel and Thomas later on too. Next slide, please. So again, you'll get to hear more about some projects from Marcel and Thomas, but I did just want to note that there is a lot of opportunity for innovation in this space. I just wanted to highlight two projects that are really driving some key innovations right on the leading edge of community solar partnerships. So if you are following community solar news, you probably know about this first one. It's an innovative program and partnership between EDP Renewables and Google, and they are constructing 80 community solar projects across 13 states in the Mid-Atlantic and Midwest. If you remember that map, that's an area that doesn't have a lot of enabling legislation. And they're using the energy generated to power their data centers, but also structuring these projects so that 10% of the money that's made by producing this power is provided as payments to participating low-income households. This is a really innovative model. They're not actually providing these on utility bills. They're doing it in a really creative way, but it's helping them both meet their goals and provide real benefits to the community. The second project I wanted to acknowledge is actually, I think my title's wrong there. It's a Starbucks project and working on having community impact agreements that provide savings to households and businesses, and also having a really innovative solar and storage concept, which is among the first in New York to do that. So we can go to the next slide. So briefly, I know my time is almost up. I did want to talk a little bit about the National Community Solar Partnership and the resources that we're able to provide. So projects like the ones I just shared, the ones you hear from Marcel and Thomas, are really moving our nation towards a more equitable clean energy future. And the National Community Solar Partnership is here to provide resources to help any sort of stakeholder in engaging in community solar and having more successful outcomes. So we have data tracking efforts, technical assistance opportunities, and peer networking available to over 1,500 members of the National Community Solar Partnership. And I think someone will be able to drop the link to join that partnership in the chat if you would like to sign up. It's a really great way to stay connected and learn about other community solar resources, learn about other projects, and connect with other stakeholders in the industry. If we can go to the last slide here. On top of that, we're setting some pretty ambitious targets for deploying community solar, hoping to have community solar power the equivalent of 5 million households by 2025 and generate $1 billion in savings. So with those bold goals, we're working really hard by developing some initiatives to address the greatest barriers to developing community solar projects. And again, if you join the National Community Solar Partnership, you can learn a little bit more about what we're doing and the tools that we're developing to help address some of these key issues that you see on our pathway to success here. And so finally, we just have a slide with some more resources. Hope that you'll check them out after this webinar. I'm also happy to connect. My information will be later in the deck. And at this point, we'll turn it back over to Bree. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Anna. That's a lot of valuable information for folks to learn from and additional opportunities to engage further. So appreciate it. Setting the stage and sharing the many different ways that folks can engage with community solar as well. Next up, we are joined by Marcel Rogers. Marcel is the Vice President of Project Development at Sunwealth. He has dedicated the past 7 years to developing and managing commercial and residential solar projects that benefit a wide range of communities across the U.S., from affordable housing providers to nonprofits and municipalities and national real estate companies. Marcel has also directed Sunwell's first low-income community solar projects and partnerships in Massachusetts, New York, and New Jersey. Prior to Sunwell, Marcel had the opportunity to manage a variety of environmental and social impact projects, ranging from green building design in Vermont, affordable housing finance in Africa, and English curriculum development in Asia. I am so pleased to have Marcel with us. I will turn it over to him. Thanks, Marcel.
Thank you, Bree. Good morning, everyone. Bree shared, I am Marcel Rogers, Vice President of Project Development. Next slide, please. I'll just go ahead and say community solar for businesses, but what we're sharing here is applicable to more than just business. I know a lot of you in the audience right now aren't from nonprofits, municipalities, consultants, and so forth. So this really should be general and applicable to all entities interested in learning more about community solar. With the title here. I'll share that this picture that you're seeing here is of the case study that I'll be highlighting. It's a project in Waltham, Massachusetts, and it is a low-income community solar project. So for those of you who are thinking, what is the optimal and ideal community solar site? Maybe this will kind of broaden the way that we typically envision and conceptualize a community solar project, as it is located in an environment built on top of a garage and benefits both an as Anna was talking about, a for-profit business, and also provides benefits to a much larger community. Next slide. So I'll just agenda here. I'll talk about Sunwealth and where we fit into the global community solar landscape. Go into some of the stakeholders before pivoting directly to businesses can participate. I know. Again, not just businesses, but others as well, and Anna touched on this a little bit in her presentation. I'll talk about some of the benefits to participating in community solar before heading into that case study about the Totten Pond project. Next slide. Sunwealth is a public benefit corporation that develops, owns, and operates a variety of different community solar, not just community solar, but solar projects, 17 different states in the US. So we are active in several different markets, and our projects range to those that benefit nonprofits and houses of worship, to providers, municipalities, and businesses. At this point, we have over 600 projects, and really we take a holistic view to how we underwrite and think about what makes for a solar project. And so that's really the key that we're able to invest in a diverse community. You can see here our mission is the future by financing and managing solar projects that benefit diverse communities through clean power, carbon reduction, cost savings, and job creation. We partner with solar installers, organizations, businesses, and investors to change who benefits from renewable energy by changing the way we invest in it. Next slide. Stakeholders of community solar projects. I'll note that this does not include a lot of you brought up as being, I suppose, like key challenges to community solar projects, such as utilities and the interconnection challenges, or kind of what happens on the municipal and so forth, and incentive program administrator challenges or others. But just an overview of just thinking specifically about the project without that overall background. So host, as Anna was talking about, is the property owner that owns the land on which the solar project would be installed. Developer and engineering, procurement, construction contractor. They're the ones who bring together the parties and ultimately handling the permitting, engineering, and ultimately the construction of the project. The financer and project owner, that's in this case Sunwealth's role in the projects that I work on, but more broadly it is the organization that ultimately owns the solar project and is putting forth that capital for its construction. Subscribers are those who are ratepayers who would benefit from the community solar project by receiving some of the credits that they could potentially be allocated and thereby getting savings and some of the other benefits that I'll get into the next slide. The operation and maintenance company is the organization that is contracted by the project owner to ultimately deal with any that arises throughout the project's ongoing operations. And then finally, the subscriber management company is kind of like the O&M company, but specifically, Anna also mentioned some of that churn or customers deciding they don't want to go forward or continue to participate, that needing to find new customers. That subscriber management company would be the entity that does it. Next slide. All right, so there's three main ways that can participate in community solar. You can be a project host by hosting the property or the project itself on your property. Subscriber would be entering into an agreement with the project owner to receive some of those credits and make payments at a discount on those credits, or you can be both a project host and a subscriber. The diagram here demonstrates a little bit about how the flow of benefits and payments work with that's going out to the project host and a subscriber in the instance where project host is both host and subscriber, and then the payments going to the financer for that discount in terms of a discounted electricity. And in the instance where the project host is also a subscriber, they may too be receiving that lease payment. So hopefully demonstrating that in a bit of a diagram that's a bit clear. Next slide. Participation, they're varied and they're many. So talk a little bit about the economic benefits being discounted. That seems to be one of the reasons that a lot of you in the audience here are interested in solar. There's also potential lease payments in the event that the organization is a community solar array. Some of the environmental benefits include, many companies now have on governance strategies or general commitments to sustainability and climate action. And so what the market is in the US, you may be eligible to receive checks to demonstrate that carbon offset. Solar also contributes to pursuing at certain points for organizations that are pursuing LEED certification. And I guess that's not even to mention all the social impact benefits that could also be had from a solar project. Depending on the market, again, there are additional incentives for development and implementation of these solar arrays that, I guess, through your participation either in hosting or even paying a premium for some of those credits, you're then able to allow low income and the off-takers are like the subscribers to receive even greater discounts. So there are a lot of great ways different organizations contribute to a new solar project. Go ahead to the next slide just to go ahead and go to some benefits on the case study. So this is that project that I highlighted at the very beginning with that photo. It is located right off of I-95 in Waltham, Massachusetts. It is a low-income community on top of a garage, a canopy project that occupies about 28,000 square feet of a 6-story garage. And the host, or the project host, is Boston Properties, which is the largest owners, managers, and developers of Class A office space in the U.S. And in a way, they are redefining what looks like by emphasizing their ESG commitments and taking ownership over our putting solar in this urban environment and creating these solar projects that may look atypical to traditionally conceptualize a community solar project. The way this project is structured, it has entered into a 20-year agreement to purchase 50 parks, serving as that anchor institution that was mentioned a couple times before. Through that agreement, a site license for that duration. The remaining % of the power and those credits are allocated to income-eligible participants, and those, again, having a different term than that, it's a 1-year auto-renewing subscription. There's variation in terms of those organizations that might be interested in looking to become subscribers, whether it's 1 year auto or 20-year anchor institutions. There's variation in that as well. Next slide. This project was built in 2021, so it's been operational for years. And I think the general duration is what we typically see for this size, where there's a lot of engineering involved. However, the construction went on a bit longer, about 8 months, due to complications with COVID and pandemic and so forth. But in general, very smoothly. I'll say that really the environmental impact is impressive. Of course, the size of the project is 614 kilowatts DC garage, plus the estimated output, that 13,000 megawatt hours over the year period, is starting to put a small dent in what we need to do to become more resilient. The social impacts there are I'd like to highlight. So again, with this being a low-income community solar project, 50% of that power sold to LMI populations and organizations that are nonprofit organizations serving those LMI communication populations. They're receiving a 25% discount off of the. And just to give you a sense of what these organizations look like, two in particular, Heading Home and Caritas, that are based in Massachusetts. They both work within the low-income housing sector and supports the most vulnerable populations by providing emergency shelter, transitional housing, and permanent. Really, by Boston Properties hosting this project, we're able to both provide a benefit to a public institution, but also open up the space for other organizations to benefit. In total, the project is going to save the subscribers $180,000 over a 20-year term. And I think I'll just end this presentation here by saying that to adapt to climate change and promote an equitable future for all, we need more of these kinds of projects. These projects in which private businesses, such as some of partnering to use public programs like federal and state incentives to build projects that provide opportunities for nonprofit organizations, my population, to share in the benefits of clean energy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcel, for sharing those wonderful case studies, and also from a financier perspective, kind of the different roles there too, and the different types of engagement. And that was a wonderful call to action too there at the end, speaking to the benefits of engagement with community solar. Thank you, Marcel. And last but not least, we are joined by Thomas Grant, who is the Global Manager of Energy Initiatives at the Wendy's Company, where he has managed Wendy's participation in Duke, Florida's Community Energy Connection Program and assisted franchises in developing on-site and off-site solar opportunities. He's managed EMS and HVAC upgrade initiatives while at Wendy's and works with the corporate social responsibility team to achieve Wendy's recently announced science-based target emission reduction goal. Huge congrats there. Prior to joining Wendy's in 2021, Thomas worked for over 10 years on energy management, EMS, and remote commissioning. In addition to being a certified energy manager, Thomas has a degree in economics from University of Wyoming and a master's in environmental management from Duke University's Nichols School of Environment. Before I turn over to Thomas, did also want to mention, if folks do have additional questions, I see folks already entering those into the Q&A and Slido. Please go ahead and continue doing so. If you'd like to direct it towards a particular presenter, feel free to include that in your message. And we look forward to answering those at the end. Thank you, Thomas, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Bree. It's great to be here. Great job by the previous speakers, and I've been monitoring some of the questions in the Slido, so I hope to be able to cover a couple of those. So I wanted to start a little bit about Wendy's, our science-based target, and why we would be interested in things like renewables and community solar. So Wendy's is the #2 hamburger chain, and #5 QSR. QSR is quick serve restaurant. We have over 7,000 restaurants worldwide, about 6,000 of those in the US. And then about 415 company-owned and operated restaurants between the US and the UK. You can go to the next slide, please. Why is Wendy's interested in renewables and community solar? Well, we, one of Dave Thomas's founding principles is to do the right thing. And we believe in doing so and have set a science-based target that covers our scope 1 and 2 and 3 emissions. So our scope 1 and 2 emissions reduction goal is a 47% absolute reduction based on 2019. And the goal is to get that reduction by 2030, which is coming right up. And then for our scope 3, it's to reduce by the same percent, but on a per franchise restaurant basis. So 47% per restaurant. You can go to the next slide, please. The good news for Wendy's company is that for years, we have been investing in and working on emissions reductions through energy efficiency. So long before we announced our science-based target, we've been working to reduce energy use in our restaurants and our franchisee restaurants. One underpinning of the quick serve restaurant industry, and not just for Wendy's, is to be able to deliver our products and food quickly. So to do so, you have to be efficient at that work. And Wendy's is very efficient at producing delicious food quickly when our customers are buying it. And for us, we sort of view a couple different levers as reducing emissions. One is using less to begin with, and that's typically where folks start on their energy journey. Is the best way to avoid emissions is to use less energy to begin with. So you can see on the chart to the right our progress so far on our scope 1 and 2 and scope 3 emissions. This chart is from our CSR report that we published earlier this year. And so far, we're about 34% of our way towards our goal on our scope 1 and 2 emissions. And we're about 40% of our way on the goal for our scope 3 franchise per franchise restaurant emissions reduction. And you can see where we started in 2019, where we progressed to 2022, all relative to our goals for 2030. But with saying all this, and despite our work on energy efficiency, there are some hurdles. So as you can tell from our previous slide, about 95% of our total restaurant count are owned by franchisees. That means that Wendy's company doesn't have direct control of how those restaurants are operated or how they're using their energy. What we think works best is to encourage and promote and provide good solutions to make it attractive to reduce energy use and to do things like renewable energy procurement. For us, the energy use data that our franchisees have is voluntarily submitted to Wendy's company. So it's not required that they share how much energy they're using. So again, we need to figure out ways to incentivize them to do so and make it worthwhile, provide benefits for them to look at what their energy use is and to pay attention to what their emissions are. Quick serve restaurants and burger restaurants have relatively small footprint, intense energy use when the restaurant is open, but relative to like a data center, a grocery store, perhaps something like a hospital, our total load for annual energy use is pretty low. And it's dispersed, right? So we have, as I mentioned, 7,000 restaurants across the world. That energy intensity use is spread out across all those sites. Oftentimes for quick serve restaurant industry, the site is leased. Perhaps the building is owned, but the real estate is leased, or perhaps both are leased, which can limit your opportunities for doing things like on-site solar. I think that was talked about earlier, that for some folks, it's almost physically impossible to have on-site solar. And another limitation there for us is that our roofs are not very big and they're full of equipment and exhausting fumes, heat from cooking, and it's not a great place to have solar panels. Finally, our parking lots are pretty busy places between drive-through and delivery trucks. That can also present a challenge in developing on-site solar for things like parking lot canopies or canopies over the drive-through. You can go to the next slide, please. So I noticed in the Slido, there was a question on enjoying the concept of community solar, but having a challenge with RECs and keeping the RECs by participating in community solar. So that's a really good question. And that's something to consider. For Wendy's company, our preferences for renewables are that we can have renewable purchases that are cost neutral or save money from all our alternatives. We need to have impact, so we need to make progress towards our emissions reduction goals, and that typically means having RECs. And there needs to be reasonable term and risk. So for us, longer than 10 years is a really long time and presents a lot of risks. You know, we saw recently something like COVID can really turn our economy and businesses that we think are pretty stable on tops of their heads. And so, you know, we don't know what we don't know. And so we need to be careful about the risk and the term. Now, those are probably the same three concerns everybody would have. And if we had a solution, a perfect solution for all three of those, our renewable transition in the US would probably be much further along, right? I mean, these are pretty reasonable and pretty basic, but they are a challenge. The current market, typically renewables have a higher cost for one reason or another, not necessarily on the generation, but the final delivered cost is typically higher currently. As that question pointed out, oftentimes it's difficult to have a REC associated with your renewable project unless you're the owner or you're the developer. And then there is risk. If you're not the owner, you're not developer, you're relying on other entities to help you make progress towards your goals. And then currently, you know, all sorts of supply chain, manufacturing, delivery issues can add to the unknowns. On top of that, there are a lot of folks like Wendy's company out there in the market looking for renewable energy solutions. Next slide. This is something that we have produced that we share with our franchisees, and we call our energy roadmap. And I know it's difficult to read the small print, but essentially what we're trying to demonstrate here is that there are steps that our franchisees can take along their energy reduction and energy emissions reduction paths. And a lot of those are low cost, no cost, that start with best practices. So best operational practices, buying energy efficient equipment, doing some of the things that folks have been doing for years, like installing LED lighting, retro commissioning current equipment, test and air balance, things like that. Towards the end of this journey, you can see in stage 4 are renewables. And long before I ever agreed to do this talk, we have community solar as one of the first steps on that journey. And the reason, which we'll get to in a moment, is because it is a good way to dip your toes into the renewable energy space. You can go to the next slide, please. And not to say that there aren't other renewable energy solutions out there, but for some of those things that I mentioned that are Wendy's preferences and are challenges for most entities looking for renewable energy, community solar can be a good solution. So as was mentioned early on, you know, there are some states where community solar is enabled. And so in those places, it provides a good regulatory and market solution for renewable supply. It typically does come as cost neutral or with some savings, and with some creativity, you can typically get RECs, or depending on the program, you can have RECs included. So to get to some specific examples of REC, so one of the programs that we participate in for community solar is through Duke Energy of Florida's Community Energy Connection, because that is a utility sponsored program. And the way Duke of Florida has set that up, participants get the RECs with the participation in the program. We're also looking at some third-party developed community solar programs in Illinois, New York, Massachusetts. And our strategy in those locations is that we use some of the cost savings from the community solar program to purchase RECs, and we still end up with neutral or cost savings on our energy supply and the RECs. So you can go to the next slide, please. This is a little bit of information on our Duke of Florida Community Energy Connection program. But by the end of the at least our allotment in the program, the 35 Wendy's Company restaurants in the greater Orlando, Florida area will all have 100% solar power. There aren't penalties to leave. They have a wait list. So if something happens with a Wendy's site, or we open a different location, we're able to move that load around. Initially, there are some fees for the project, but over the term of the project, we will have a net beneficial cost. And for us, this will be about 6% of our total emissions reduction for our restaurants, and about 13% of our total science-based target commitment. Next slide, please. In Illinois, our goal would be to enroll all of our Wendy's Company restaurants in that state in the Community Shines program. And this one is not necessarily utility sponsored. It's enabled through legislation. The utility acts as a broker between the developer and the customer. But this is the case where we can use some of the savings to go towards REC purchases and the rest of the savings to reduce our costs for energy. And when you combine those two, we get our preferences for our renewables. I think I have one last slide before handing it over to Bree. So a couple things to keep in mind, as have been mentioned before, different states have different programs, and those terms can vary from one place to another. You do give up some of the leadership in the project development, so that brings with it some uncertainties. The RECs do typically stay with the provider or developer, so you need to be careful with that. And the one other thing that I wanted to specifically mention is that there can be challenges like any renewable project that filter through community solar. So some that were brought up earlier were delays in project development. We had an issue in Florida with Hurricane Ian, reducing some of the solar generation on those sites. So there are some of the same challenges that with any renewable project that come with community solar, but by and large provide some really good solutions to the challenges we're all facing in that space. Thanks for your time, and I'll hand it back over to Bree.
Thank you so much, Thomas, for sharing that information and sharing too how Wendy's interfaces and engages with community solar. That was wonderful to hear. We do have a few minutes left, so I think we do have some time to at least maybe really transition to one or two Q&A questions. So if folks, I know they've been flowing in over the past hour or so, and if our presenters are able to, we can definitely follow up to and address some of any outstanding questions. Thank you everybody, to our panelists for your insightful presentations, and to folks for submitting those questions. Just to start off, if our panelists would like to join us back on video, I did want to go towards the questions that have been upvoted and see if there's additional insights here. I know Thomas was speaking to how Wendy's has engaged in this first question here up top about keeping those renewable energy certificates. That was a great example to get to hear about. I'm curious if Anna or Marcel had anything to add to the challenge of retaining those RECs when engaging in community solar.
I'll just add that it's really market dependent from what we've seen. And some markets, through with their utility incentive program, sometimes they allow you to buy back the rights to the RECs. Often you have to forfeit them to participate in incentive markets. And so it is a challenge too if there's if the company is agnostic to where the RECs are coming from. Sometimes we're able to structure agreements whereby we can buy cheaper RECs a different market and have that be incorporated into a PPA or an agreement with the customer. So there's some flexibility. It's a challenge.
Thank you, Marcel. Appreciate that. I think that's helpful additional context too on that. I think we have time maybe for one more question here. And I know we were talking about the differing ways in which to engage in community solar, one being as a subscriber. So this question really gets at, if there is a subscriber fee, is it guaranteed that people will see those savings on their bills? Knowing that's a big impetus to engage with community solar is to see those cost savings. I'm not sure if someone wants to take this one first. I see Anna unmuted, so I'll toss it over to Anna.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak at a high level to this. So there is no sort of like inherent guarantee that you will see savings through community solar at this point. We see the level of savings vary between different state markets. We've talked a lot about how the incentives may vary or requirements may vary for participating in different community solar markets in different states. That can really drive levels of savings, but it can also just be dependent on the way that the project is structured. So who's owning it, how are subscribers paying into the system, et cetera. So no guaranteed rate at this point. We typically see savings between 10 and 15% right now, though, and the National Community Solar Partnership set a target of at least 20% savings. If you talk with advocates for low and moderate income households, somewhere around 50% savings is a much more meaningful and impactful level, though.
Thank you so much, Anna. I think that's helpful too, additional information too on that note. And again, thank you everybody for submitting so many questions. We'll go ahead and follow up with our presenters and share out additional responses as they're able. Just a few items to close. I did want to share a little information about our webinar series. And this was just one of many as a part of our 2023 Better Building Summer Webinar Series. As you can see, we have a great lineup of presentations throughout August. Please visit our Better Building Solutions Center to learn more and register. If we go to the next slide, we hope that you'll join us on our upcoming webinar on Thursday, October 17th, entitled The Next Big Thing, HVAC Control Technology for Small and Medium-Sized Commercial Buildings. Please join this webinar for an overview of current RTU control technology capabilities and to hear from 2 building owners who are taking advantage of the benefits that they offer. And then finally, if we go to the next slide, I'd like to close and thank our panelists again for taking the time to be here with us today and share those compelling stories coming from their organizations and the many benefits, and also hearing too potentially considerations to take when engaging with community solar. Please feel free to contact our presenters directly with additional questions. And again, if we did not get to your question today during the Q&A period, we'll follow up and be able to see if our presenters are willing and able to answer a few of those to follow up with our audience. I encourage everybody to follow our Better Buildings Initiative on LinkedIn and Twitter for the latest news. You can find our social media handles and their respective icons on the left-hand side of the slide, and you'll receive an email notification when today's recording, slides, and transcript are made available on the Better Building Solutions Center. Thank you everybody again for joining, and we hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care.